afternoon. My name is Estrada. I'm the United States Attorney. I'm joined here by Assistant United States Attorney Jeff Mitchell. As you saw earlier this morning, the defendant in this case, Mr. Mizuhara, went before a judge and admitted his guilt in this case. As we told all of you 4 months ago, this case was thoroughly investigated, thoroughly vetted. We came to the conclusion, based on the evidence, that Mr. Mizuhara had committed massive fraud, and that fraud was committed against the one victim in this case, who was Shohei Ohtani. In fact, after we announced the charges, we only discovered more fraud in this case. We discovered Mr. Mizuhara had victimized Mr. Ohtani to the extent that he wouldn't even pay for dental. He stole money from Mr. Ohtani to pay for his own dental care. The fraud was deep and the fraud was extensive. Well, now you see Mr. Mizuhara has gone before a federal judge. He stated under oath that he was fully responsible for this fraud. He's accepted his responsibility. He's admitted to his guilt, and we will proceed to sentencing in this case. Finally, bring vindication of the victim, but also the larger community that demands we address these types of fraud cases aggressively and with justice in mind. I'll take any questions.
Are prosecutors going to seek a downward variance at sentencing, or have you decided?
We have not decided what we will seek at sentencing. We will provide information to the court. As many of you know, the court is ultimately responsible for the sentence in this case, but we will provide full information to the court to make a reasoned decision. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Thank you, Neil. In theory, if the county is pled guilty, what is the maximum exposure of time he's in the maximum?
The maximum time exposure of the last 30 years made in theory based on what he has pled to. However, I will note that we are guided by what is known as the sentencing guidelines, and those guidelines may call for a lesser sentence. That being said, based on the extent of the conduct here, the sentence would likely be one that calls for incarceration.
Is there any indication that Ohtani was aware or knew any of this was happening?
What I have stated clearly from the outset of this investigation to the announcement of this complaint is that Mr. Ohtani is considered a victim in this case. It is clear from the evidence that he did not profit from this, he did not benefit from this, he in fact was harmed substantially by this. What we saw was Mr. Mizuhara was the one that, based on his addiction to sports betting, took advantage of his friend, the person who'd given him an opportunity, and victimized Mr. Ohtani.
Is there any indication that the MLB player on the Padres, Mr. Capano, is under a federal investigation? And what's next into the investigation into the book Mr. Mizuhara?
I can't get into any other investigations beyond what we're talking about here, which is the guilty plea by Mr. Mizuhara.
Is there anything in the way of a message being sent either to Major League Baseball or to players who are coming here from foreign countries and who may not be conversant with U.S. laws or the big city? I'll use that phrase on that. Is this something to, as an advisory, to warn them, trust but verify, if you want to call it that?
I think there is a major message from this case, but I wouldn't limit it to Major League Baseball players. I would extend it to our entire community. Fraud of this sort, fraud by people who have the confidence of others, is rampant in our community, in our nation. We see elder abuse all the time in similar situations. We see all kinds of people being abused by lawyers, people who have their trust and confidence, and everyone needs to be aware. They should be suspicious. They should take precautions when they have others managing their money and managing their affairs.
Is there anything that Major League Baseball may want to consider implementing in rules of conduct for players and or their financial advisors? Is there any role for MLB in this thing?
I can't comment on what MLB will do, but I will say, because of this rampant fraud, my office has established something known as the Vulnerable Victims Task Force. That is tasked with looking at fraud against older adults, against immigrant groups. I will say Mr. Ohtani is an immigrant. He came to this country, is not familiar with the ways of this country, and therefore was easily prey to someone who is more familiar with our financial systems and was able to take advantage of Mr. Ohtani.
When's that sentencing actually going to happen? What date?
The sentencing will happen on October 25th of this year.
What led you to Mr. Mizuhara? What precipitated opening that investigation into him? And this proceeded very quickly. Why is that?
There was an open federal investigation into sports betting, and Mr. Mizuhara, his conduct came to our attention through that investigation. I will say, in terms of the speed of the investigation, we try to move quickly in investigations in general. You will see many of our cases have moved quite swiftly. We just had a guilty plea with regard to hate crimes case yesterday, an individual who shot 2 Jewish congregants on 2 separate days as they left the synagogue. That has moved swiftly. We try to bring swift justice, particularly when we have victims who need that vindication.
What is the likelihood of Mr. Mizuhara being reported back to Japan and face another sentence?
Based on the conduct he's pleaded guilty to, he faces significant immigration consequences. I will not get into predictions on what will ultimately happen, but he certainly faces a risk of deportation back to Japan and having to leave this country.
Two more questions and we'll wrap it up.
Is he not a U.S. citizen?
He's not a U.S. citizen.
On a personal level, what was it like to get that moment today where he admitted to doing this, taking advantage of the language barrier and stealing from the Dodgers superstar?
We were confident in this case from the outset. That's why we went before you and talked about the complaint in this case. That's why we were able to bring federal charges so swiftly in this case. We were very confident in this outcome. Whether he chose to go to trial or pleaded guilty, we were confident that the evidence would ultimately show Mr. Mizuhara victimized Mr. Ohtani.
Anything regarding deportation would take place, though, after completion of his federal sentence, correct?
Correct. He would face a federal sentence. Following the federal sentence is when he'd be deported. He would not avoid his federal sentence through deportation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can you give us a brief remark in Spanish for Telemundo?
Yes.
Thank you.
Where should I look for?
Yes.
Buenas tardes. Soy fiscal federal Martín Estrada. Hoy anunciamos que el señor Mizuhara ha anunciado que es culpable en este caso. Él es culpable y, como yo le dije hace unos meses, la evidencia en este caso, las pruebas demuestran que él cometió un fraude enorme contra la víctima en este caso, que es el señor Ohtani.
Thank you.
And it never changed. There was still no indication he bet on baseball, correct? You never found any evidence of baseball betting?
We looked extensively at all the records in sports betting in this case. We found no indication that those substantial records which carried over for several years of any betting